This is David Tulis. I do thank you for giving me just a couple minutes of your time here at Nooga Radio. Nooga Radio, live on Facebook, live on YouTube. At Facebook, it's Nooga Radio. On YouTube, type in Hot News Talk Radio. Make that your favorite platform, and you can watch our show live. We're also live at noogaradio.com. That's noogaradio.com, a website whose only purpose, or the only purpose of which, is to stream our all of our shows, whether it's Sean Hannity at 3, Colin Cowherd at noon, Alex Jones in the evening, or Coast to Coast AM in the late night watches. We have the best morning show around with Russell and America's First News. America's First News in the morning. Anytime you're up, we're live with some of the best coverage, long quotes from public officials. I really like the fact that a public official in America's First News is quoted in detail. In other words, you hear a long quote, the whole context of what someone is saying, not just the snippet that your standard newscast will have. We are a CBS radio affiliate, and I cover local economy and the free markets, brought to you by Jim McCoon law firm. Clay Whitaker is there to help you in your special needs, also by Dahlia's. Now, there's a criminal case coming up in civil court. That is to say, in city court, it'll be in city court. A traffic, well, it could be in sessions court. I'm not quite sure which one, but anyway, in one of the inferior courts, either county or city, and the charges are threefold against the man who was behind the wheel. I won't say driving, okay, because that's a commercial term. I'll avoid commercial usages here if I can. A man behind the steering wheel in a sedan, in which the passenger was Demetrius Coonrod, the city councilwoman. The man's name is Anthony Gladden. He gave his name, his date of birth, and his social to Tiffany, the officer who arrested Tiffany Lentz, the officer who arrested him. Now, they were arrested because they were stopped, right? If you're stopped, you are arrested. You're not just detained, you are arrested. Once you're stopped and arrested, once you are said to be under the authority of the officer, you are under arrest. And they were both arrested. They were stopped for an expired registration tag on the car owned by the councilwoman. Now, the car, because it has a VIN, a vehicle identification number, registered with the Department of Safety and Homeland Security, it is a state car, effectively. The state holds the title to that car as a vehicle. The owners don't have the title. They have only a certificate of title, which is to say they have a proof that the title exists, and they have a certificate of it. The title is owned by the state. So this is effectively a state car. Well, yeah, your car too. I'm not talking just about Mrs. Coonrod's car. I'm talking about your car. Your car is a state vehicle. You don't have the title, right? The title is not possessed by you. It is possessed by the state. And that is because the state claims ownership of everything in commerce that moves on the roads, public and private. Now, this car was in private use that night in June, mid-June. The story was first covered by Emmett Gienap in the Chattanooga Times Free Press on Saturday. Saturday's edition is on the front of Metro page. And it involves the cast of characters, the officer, and also Fred Fletcher, the former chief, and the councilwoman who effectively demands to have an appeal over the officer's head. Now, this is called a by-the-books traffic stop, and it's by the books for many reasons, right? And we want to look at that because there's a very shrill outcry against Mrs. Coonrod, and I said leading the waving of swords and lances is Roy Exum. In his column today, Coonrod shows stripes. He's very sarcastic, very bitter about her criminal background, right? A background from which she has repented, either in terms of man or in terms of God, I'm not sure. But she has made a reformation that Erskine Oglesby, the fellow new council member, says or indicates is of a Christian nature. In other words, she has had a change of heart as to whom her God is. It's not her anymore as it was before, but it is God Himself. And so let's presume for a moment now that she has made a reformation of repentance of sins, right, which are offenses against God, and she is seeking to obey His commands and live according to his ways. And that's part of that is how she, with her fresh demeanor from a very bitter and difficult past, won election. She won election, though perhaps many in her district did not know about her background. The Chattanoogan, John Wilson's local media platform, publishing the details about her election, about her past, only after she won the vote. A couple of days after she won the election, a massive dossier published in the Chattanoogan, which makes me wonder if somehow that he couldn't get together in time to publish before the election, or he was afraid to publish it before the election because that might turn the vote against her and humiliate her at the polls. But nonetheless, she has a criminal background, and to that, Roy Exum makes appeal in his accounting of Tiffany Lentz's arrest of these two people. Now, they were not taken into custody; they were not arrested and booked. They should have been taken to the magistrate had they been arrested, but they were simply cited to court. Not both of them, but the user of the car, the man behind the wheel, Anthony Gladden, who gave his social security number interestingly enough, in his wonderfully nosy fashion, Officer Lentz asked Mrs. Coonrod her SSN as well. Now, none of that information should have been given at all. There was these people did not stand upon their rights. They acted unwisely. Now, if they had been like you, my listener, who are going to be today a subscriber to Nooganomics.com, they would know what to do in a case like a traffic stop. They would know some of the basics about their rights. Remember, we're not slaves, right? We are not slaves. And if we have two black people in a car, we would think that they, more than anybody, would understand slavery and understand how to, if they're not slaves, to maintain their status of being free. But in fact, we're not really free. And we can see in that video posted at the Chattanooga Times Free Press website and, of course, on YouTube, we can see two people, two non-military civilians, as the police call them, two civilians in an occupied city, occupied by a 500-strong paramilitary vertically integrated organization, the police department, serving the mayor, Andy Burke, right? The white liberal lawyer, the white liberal Jewish lawyer, Andy Burke. Serving him and serving his interest is the police department. And this stop was by the books. It was by the books, according to Emmett Gienap's story in Saturday's edition. Now, the question of the charges comes up, and I'm marshaling just a sketch for Nooganomics.com today as to what the defenses are. Now, one of the charges is driving without a license, and I've asked the city police department's spokesman this morning for confirmation from Rob Simmons as to the charge. Is Anthony being charged with under Title 55, 53, 51? Now, you're starting to yawn. Well, listen, I'm just giving you the facts here, okay? Because I believe that's the statute that is routinely used with which to charge, routinely used, and by which the police charge individuals who are operating outside of commerce. Now, by that I mean people who are traveling without a license. Now, the police would say you're driving without a license. Now, you cannot drive without a license, okay? Because driving is a commercial act. If you're driving without a license, you must have your license, right? Because that's what the rules say. In fact, the statute under which I believe Anthony Gladden is going to be charged says just that. It's very clearly applying to people who are in commerce, okay? Either you're traveling privately or you're traveling in commerce. Now, you might say, well, big deal. What's the difference? Well, it matters. It's important because you, my listener, with your driver's license, you are in commerce. Now, I have a driver's license too. In fact, I had to sue to get it. I sued to get a driver's license when I probably should have had more sense and just said, well, I'm not in commerce. I'm not going to get a driver's license. But I thought I hadn't made that distinction. Right? I was thinking very conventionally, as you, my listener, tend to think. But here's what. Just listen to this language that I believe. Well, all right. Rob Simmons hasn't gotten back to me, but I'm pretty sure that Anthony Gladden is going to be charged under this provision. It's called the Exhibit on Demand statute. Okay. Exhibit on Demand says, I demand your driver's license and you don't have one, so I'm charging you under this provision. Okay, here's what the provision actually says. Now, get this. Get this. And this point here that I'm making is one of Anthony Gladden's defenses. Here's what it says. Every licensee shall have such licensees, operators, or chauffeur's license in immediate possession at all times when operating a motor vehicle, and shall display the same upon demand of a court of a general sessions, etc. Okay, so you have, it's exhibit on demand when an officer, effectively an officer or a judge or a deputy or an inspector of the department demands to see it. Okay, but it can't, that there has to be some previous crime that's being alleged in that. In other words, there has to be probable cause to ask it that you violated a law of some kind. So the registration on this car was out of date. Again, registration is for commercial vehicles. All people who are operators of motor vehicles, who are drivers or chauffeurs, have to have registration on their cars if that car is in commerce. Now, Mike Steele, I was thinking was going to call me this morning, but evidently he's busy. But he's heartless and merciless on this point. He would say, well, no, these people are clearly operating in commerce. They should have the book thrown at them. They should be even have been taken to jail, he would say. And I'm have much more lenity and much more flexibility. And I think that the defense can be made by Anthony Gladden that the statute is misapplied because he's not a licensee. He does not have a driver license according to the YouTube film by the cops that's put out by the Times Free Press through an open records request. And there is no license. He's not a man who's licensed by the state to drive and operate a motor vehicle. He is a traveler in a car. Okay, there's a difference legally. And that difference is being argued tomorrow in the Court of Appeals in Nashville. Go to Nooganomics.com to find out what that issue is about. But Anthony is not a licensee. The statute clearly cannot apply to someone who doesn't have a license, right? Because it says every licensee shall have such licensees, operators, or chauffeur's license in immediate possession. That's a very wooden sentence. A licensee shall have such licensee's operator or chauffeur's license in immediate possession. Well, that's because it's very clear who the person the statute is aimed at is, what the duty he has is, that is to have a license, and it has to have, that licensee has to have said licensee's license on his person because he's operating in commerce. Now, you say, well, what does operating in commerce mean? Well, that means that you, the listener, are involved in the buying and selling of a service. And you're using the people's roads with which to make a living and make a profit. You are carrying people or goods for hire. You are involved in what's called transportation. Transportation is federally regulable if it's interstate. And transportation is, again, commercial use of the people's roads for the sake of profit. And the thing you're caring about are passengers, which are people who pay their fare, or you're like a bus service. Greyhound would be an example of that. There are other bus services. There are Grooms Transportation, which carries people to airports in Nashville and Knoxville and Atlanta. It has passengers, right? If you pay the $80 to get to Atlanta and back, you are a passenger and you're involved in transportation. Groom has a duty to be regulated because it is making a profit on what? On the thing that belongs to the people. That is every boulevard, roadway, highway, avenue, and street. These belong to the people, with the state protecting the people's interests by regulating all those who profit from it or try to make a profit from the use of that road carrying people or goods. Now, you see, a person who's involved in commerce has to have a license because he has to show that he has met the requirements for the public health, safety, and welfare. That connection between regulation and that welfare of the public is open to question, however, in the Hicks decision by the Supreme Court, when it says that there's not a clear connection between public safety and licensing, that it is an open question. And the Judge Mickey Barker of Chattanooga, writing that opinion 10 years ago or maybe 15 years ago now, says that there is a tenuous, if invisible, connection between safety and licensure. So that's still open. And that is something that I'm not sure has been brought up in the Hirsch case, which is being argued tomorrow. So one defense for Anthony Gladden is that that one provision, that one charge, does not apply to him because he's not a licensee. Okay, so the question then is, Anthony Gladden should demand to be in short form? Let me just tell you what he should do. He should demand to be indicted as Hanson Melvin did. Hanson Melvin, the walking wild black police abuse victim, whose abuse was protected by Neil Pinkston, the district attorney, protected because Pinkston has not prosecuted the criminal act of perjury. Hanson Melvin did what Anthony Gladden maybe could do, and that is demand to be indicted, and then in proper criminal court demand an evidentiary hearing. And there he would ask the city to produce, or the state to produce all the evidence it has that he was operating in commerce at the time. What would the evidences be? Well, proofs that anybody in the car was a passenger. Well, they would have to show that that person had paid to be in that car, was being taken from point A to point B, like in a taxi, for example, and that there was money paid for that exchange, or that there were some kind of goods in that car that were being transported from point A to point B, a manifest, insurance contract, that kind of thing, to show that there was commerce involving the movement of goods. The defendant, Mr. Gladden, would say, well, I'm not involved in commerce. This case has to be dismissed. But he would have to not use language that's commonly used that's in the vernacular that really borrows from commerce. He would have to say, I was traveling. I was going from point A to point B. I was behind the wheel. I was moving my car about. If you admit that you're driving, if you make even the admission that you're driving or don't object to the claim that you are driving, if you don't object to that, you are admitting the jurisdiction of commercial government against you. And so I don't think that Anthony Gladden or even Demetrius Coonrod have sufficient wherewithal or knowledge of the law to make that kind of case, right? They haven't studied this matter as you, my listener, have listened to it right here on the David Tulis Show. The only show probably in the state, probably the only media platform in the state that understands this issue by God's grace, right? By God's grace and a lot of thinking and a great deal of reading in defense of the free market. That's what I do here, David Tulis defending the free market. Now, in this ticket, there's also another interesting point. The officer Tiffany Lentz, says she can't hear the people speaking in the car, and they're kind of muffled. And at one point, a motorcycle passes, and what is coming through the window of that car is inaudible. And so she says, "Speak up." So what happens next is, in identifying the person in the second seat, the so-called passenger, Mrs. Coonrod, they say, "This is City Councilwoman Demetrius Coonrod," and they sort of shout it. And she says, the cop says that to her fellow officer, because a second cop drove up, right? A second cop drives up to protect the first, and she says that the people in the car is giving me some kind of attitude. So in other words, she resents the fact that the people in the car are raising their voices to be heard. She's just told them that she can't hear them. And so when they raise their voices to be heard, she takes it as an offense. That's how officers are trained to think. If you, my listener, don't speak calmly and quietly to the officer in the encounter, you will be viewed as escalating the conflict, right? And so as we've mentioned here on the David Tulis Show, you need to speak loudly but firmly in control, calmly but loudly, and not raise any but one window. If you lower more than one window, then the cop will accuse you, since cops try to escalate every stop into a DUI or a drug stop. They will say, "I smell marijuana." And that can't happen if there's just one window open. So if a cop tells you, my listener, lower all your windows or lower another window, because there's a cop at each one, right? Let's say there's a cop at each window of your car, and they want to lower the window, just refuse to do it. There's no rule that says you have to, but if all the windows, or if two windows are open, then a cross breeze can be used to justify the accusation that you have a drug in the car. They smell marijuana, and so they're going to escalate the stop and make you get out. That's the last thing you want to do. You want to keep the doors locked, and you want to stay in your car, and the window crack should be no more than 2 inches. That way they can't possibly smell anything in the car at all. They have to have a crosswind to smell drugs or alcohol or other. So that's what you should do, among other things. This is David Tulis, and our show covers local economy and the free market. The story is not over. The story is not over. This is a big week for an overlooked constitutional right. God-given, constitutionally guaranteed, inherent, and some would say inalienable right, and that is a property right of movement. It's going to be argued before the Court of Appeals tomorrow in Nashville. This is perhaps the most important case for liberty in the past 80 years in Tennessee, and you can count on me, David Tulis, to provide you with the best coverage of this story live on the radio station, and also through Nooganomics.com, where I will be publishing in God's good grace now, if God allows, publishing the story and a video of the hearing. It'll be a hearing that lasts probably no more than 40 minutes. And I have the feeling the judge is going to try to throw off the defendant by peppering him with questions and not letting him get to his argument and analysis. They have a stake in the status quo. They have a stake in the so-called freedoms that the soldiers who died in Chattanooga 2 years ago, the 5 military people, they apparently died for freedom. And that freedom is what the judges want to enforce against us. David Tulis.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 12.